So, welcome to part two of all things CRM. In our last part, we discussed the important steps of getting your business positioned ready for CRM and some of the steps that you have to go through to make sure that you're in place ready to adopt it. And in this part, we're going to kind of focus on more of the implementation and the adoption of it. So you've done the hard work, you've got that CRM ready to go. What do you do next as a result? So I'm joined again by Steve Baxter from ZOHO. Hello, Steve.
Hello again, Aaron.
How are you?
I'm still good, thank you.
Excellent. Glad to hear it.
Go for part two.
Excellent. Me too. So, for those who've probably missed maybe part one, if you could give us just a brief introduction about yourselves, Steve, in terms of what you do at ZOHO.
Well, they need to go back to part one, don't they? How could they miss it?
Yeah, go back to part one.
So I'm Enterprise Marketing Manager for ZOHO. So my role, I've been in marketing for way too long, really. But my role here is to move ZOHO into the mid-market, 25 staff, 250 staff, 1,000 staff organizations. We've been very strong in the SME sector up until now, and now we're trying to move because we've got the technology. We're just not known in that market, so that's my role at ZOHO.
Excellent. Fantastic, Steve. And at the end of part three, we'll give you an opportunity to be able to pitch a little bit on ZOHO if we can, in terms of, we're trying to keep it generic with regards to CRM, but at the end, we can have a conversation about ZOHO and some of the exciting stuff that's going to potentially happen. So I suppose the first question for you, Steve, right off the bat is, so you've gone out there, you've done all the hard yards, you've decided which CRM system is going to be right for you. What's the challenge now? What challenge does adopting and implementing a CRM present for a business?
Okay, well, point one is a total pain in the ass. It is get it in writing. Because even if you've done your extended specification, you've done all those flow charts about what your sales processes are, you've done all that, but the supplier who you're dealing with will be trying to sell you something that may not be what you think you're buying. It's one. I always remember the old Sale of Goods Act was something's got to be good for the purpose sold. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good for the purpose purchased.
That's right.
Two different things.
Indeed.
So, we had this terrible situation at an organization I worked for a few years ago, where we needed the CRM system to interface with Microsoft AX.
Oh, okay.
It was our ERP system, and it was the on-premises version. And they said, "Yep." It was a small CRM supplier, not ZOHO, obviously.
Quick to add.
Quick to add, not ZOHO. And they said, "Yeah, we've got a middleware application that will talk to that. No problem at all." Actually, it turned out that the middleware they planned on using would only talk to Dynamics, the cloud version, not the on-premises version. And so then they said, "Don't worry, we'll still create the interface. We'll do it with CSV files that will pass several times a day." And immediately you start thinking, I don't think that's going to work. They started going through the deployment process, and we just said, forget it. That ain't going to work. That's going to be so unreliable that we just don't have any confidence. So, we got almost all of our money back, but it was a very fraught time.
Thankfully.
So you absolutely have to get all the tiny nuts and bolts down in writing of what is going to happen, because you started off by producing a written document. After that, you've had a lot of verbal conversations about how that evolves and how that will be translated into the vendor's CRM system. None of those verbal conversations matter at all. All that matters is what's written down on paper of what the system is going to do and how it's going to do it. There's no rule about how detailed it needs to be. It's just the more detailed, the better.
I totally agree, because you don't want to, trip over at the first hurdle to some degree, because I know there are a lot of free, shall we say, options or teaser kind of options for CRM. But in reality, if you really are going for a full enterprise version for marketing and for sales, and doing all of these wonderful swizzy things, it's going to be a significant investment for your business, isn't it? You're going to have spent potentially thousands of pounds here. So you want to just make sure that the reasons what got you there are still going to be delivered the minute you start to go in a live fire exercise.
It's not just the investment, to be honest, Aaron. It's the potential. It runs
potential.
your entire sales operation.
Yeah,
your
that's right.
entire revenue depends on this system working.
Yes,
so don't forget about the money you're paying for it, but think about the amount of money you're going to earn or not earn if you get it wrong. So it is unbelievably important to get that right, and it does mean going through in painstaking detail. And to be honest, I can only say that because I have this one experience of it going completely wrong.
Absolutely.
And I don't suggest that people should do something wrong so they know how to do it right in the future. But you do find out when you've done it wrong, wow, I ain't going to do that again.
I could actually, I didn't never thought of it in that context before, in terms of, because the minute you've adopted that CRM, actually now to some degree it's going to be driving it's going to be a revenue driver for you, isn't it? And if you've got your processes and you've understood how to sell and what your internal processes are to go to market, then this thing's going to deliver for you, isn't it?
And that's the thing, you've got to measure it against why you put it in the first place. So in the last podcast we were talking about, well why do people install CRM, or do they need to? And you've got to look back at the things that were identified as the problem. So if, for example, your issue was that you weren't converting enough leads, your conversion rate was 5% or something. Now you've got the new CRM in place. Now you've got something that says you need to go through these 7 steps to improve your chance of getting sale. Has your conversion rate gone from 5% to 25%? That's a success. That's the kind of thing you need to be looking at. If you had a situation where leads were being ignored, are they still being ignored, or are they being properly closed won or closed lost or postponed? Have you been able to, a classic thing that I don't think we mentioned this in podcast number 1. One of the classic reasons why organizations put CRM in is that the upper management of the company has no real idea what's happening with sales. So once you've put CRM
I think we touched upon it a little bit, but you're right, absolutely. It's got to be a fundamental, right? We just don't know what's happening.
So once you've put it in, once you're implementing CRM, have you created those dashboards that means the MD can straight away look at the pipeline for the next 6 months, look at what sales are this month against target? Have you put those dashboards in place?
Forecasting, a critical tool that most businesses don't have the ability to be able to even begin to think about what the forecast is. What's happening next month, in the next quarter, in the next 12 months. How can we forecast with any kind of surety as to what's going to come? Are we going to hit budget? Are we going to hit plan as a result of, any senior leadership team needs that information. And typically they're probably getting it from 5 or 6 different sources, aren't they? Or they're getting it from spreadsheets, or a bit from finance and something from a salesperson, and they're having to kind of cobble these kind of bits together to be able to make some sort of decision. So CRM definitely gives you the ability to be able to see that in one centralized dashboard. But in some cases, you see those dashboards, not being developed or not being utilized. So I see that often with CRM, is that you've got this wonderful system, but you've not got your KPIs and you've not got your key reporting coming out from a dashboard point of view.
Yeah, and if you have people with different systems and you've got 2 people who are collecting their data from different places, they're probably going to have different data as well. You've got to have one point that says these are our sales figures, they're coming from CRM. If there's an issue there, fix the data in CRM if it comes from, if like an interface from your ERP or your finance system. But you've got to have one point at which this is the dashboard, this is the Bible that we are using for our data.
We'll come on to it in the next part with regards to things like integration and automation, because that's really the next step, isn't it? Because one of those considerations back in part one, where you're thinking about what my internal process is, you've got maybe Sage, you've got maybe MailChimp, you've got maybe other, pieces of software that are being utilized to engage with a customer or to record financial transactions. Some of the challenges are going to be for that implementation and adoption in terms of, how does this, standalone or all-encompassing system speak with other things as well, and other softwares, pieces of software. So I will come on to that in the next part, I'm sure, but it's an important consideration both in part one and for now, isn't it? In terms of,
it is. I mean, interfaces now. We were at a sorry, I lost you then a bit. So we were at a Forrester symposium last week, actually. Oh, okay. And one of the Forrester guys said that 75% of marketers now that they surveyed are more concerned about the interfaces of their marketing technology with other things like CRM than they are about the actual technology itself. So right. User interfaces, email content, etc. They're more interested in the way technology talks to each other, or more concerned about it than anything else. So interface, as I said, we'll come on to it later, but interfaces are absolutely critical.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So we touched upon sort of data integrity, so or data, so should I say? So thinking about now, you've got this wonderful CRM system. I can think of examples where I'm trying to take information from my CRM now that gives me information that I can make decisions on from a sales leadership perspective, and then start to look at why, hang on a second, my percentages don't look right, and my pipeline's not up to date, and I've got fields missing. So the challenge of now I've got this CRM in place. How do I make sure that the stuff that's coming out of it is meaningful and correct?
So the key thing there is deciding from the outset what you're expecting people to record. If you take a look at CRM as a sales tool, first of all, just look at that one function of it. You could turn around and say, at the lowest possible level, you need to be able to record when a lead was created and whether it was closed won or closed lost. If that's all you're going to record, to be honest, you may as well not bother having it. That really is such a low level. So you need to find some level that works for your business between that and recording every instance of email communication or voice communication. And it'll be somewhere between that. And the acid test really is if your salesman Joe leaves. Do you have enough information in the CRM system to pick up that relationship again quickly? That's the acid test, because that's what CRM really should be there for. It's there, yes, to improve your sales processes, but it's also there to protect you against staff leaving.
And give you that continuity, right? Because that's very often what that you've heard that expression, that relationship goes with that person. And now I'm employing somebody to come up and pick up the reins, and it's starting from scratch to some degree.
And if you've got someone new coming in and saying, "Oh, I'm your new account manager. Can you tell me what's happened in the last 2 years?" You sound like an idiot.
You do. So and I've been there.
They're going to really start thinking, I need to deal with some. Well, apart from anything else, I need to start dealing with someone else now because they don't record this. And
That's
B,
right.
I'm not going to lose anything by moving to another supplier because this supplier doesn't know anything about me.
Exactly.
So you're going to look like an idiot. So it's things like support issues. Have they got any unresolved or resolved issues and cases that have been recorded? Again, that comes into its own if you've got an integrated support system with your CRM system.
Exactly.
Ongoing negotiations. Sometimes a salesman will land a big deal, take their commission, and then leave the company. But an awful lot of their negotiations will still be ongoing. So you've got to be able to pick those up. So that's got to be recorded in your CRM. Meetings. What meetings do you record? Well, maybe not absolutely every single meeting, but you certainly want to be honest, want someone to have a very good reason for meeting a client and not recording it in CRM.
Completely.
So that will be a meeting between a salesperson. If they come to user group meetings, or if your service manager's gone to meet them, that should be in there as well. All their support tickets, that should be in there. Then you've got other things where you might have an automated system that can help. So, for example, lots of CRM systems, ours and everybody else's, I think, has a facility where when you send them an email, that email can get logged against their CRM record. And you have a choice of either automatically logging all emails, which is probably overkill, or you just write an email to them and it pops up and says, do you want that recorded against them? If there's an important email, it's much easier to say, click yes, add that to the record, than to summarize it and manually put it onto the CRM record. So you can do that kind of thing as well. And the same can happen with phone systems. So you can link your phone system to your CRM system. Again, that's not just a ZOHO thing. A lot of our competitors do it as well. So the fact you've made a phone call can be recorded against a CRM record. Obviously, then you've still actually got to put in some kind of summary of what was said in that phone call.
I think
all of this information.
No, sorry, Steve. Go on. Sorry, I interrupted there.
It's the kind of thing you can record against people, and the judgment is your own as to how much you want to record. It's a question of, if that salesperson leaves, what do you need to know to pick up that relationship quickly with the next salesperson?
I'm thinking in real world examples. I mean, the ability for me to be able to, as a sales leader, help support and coach my team, look at conversion rates, look at, how many meetings we're conducting on average to be able to move that opportunity and that deal through the pipeline. It's just opened a world of being able to now finally get some transparency and visibility on how, as a business and as a team, we're performing, right? And how how our customer is perceiving us. The ability now I've adopted this CRM, it does open this world, doesn't it, of opportunity. It can get overly complex sometimes, but just as a leadership team and as a salesperson, it should streamline that conversation, shouldn't it? And it should make coaching, performance kind of conversations much easier, because we can see it. It's visible, it's transparent, and also it's kind of helping us engage with the customer in a better way as well. So at this stage, if I'm adopting and the CRM is really going, it really is starting to open up a world of opportunity for us, if this is really working very well. So I'm thinking, think of some of so at the stage where I'm adopting and, we're starting to run with it. In your experience, Steve, where are some of the, at this stage, it's on board, what are some of the reasons why it potentially fails? So,
data.
Data.
It's so boring. And again, this Forrester event was a classic, because small businesses tend to think that big businesses and enterprises live in an entirely different world. No, they don't. They have exactly the same problems. They're just on a bigger scale. So in many ways, SMEs have it better because it's easier to fix when it's still quite small. But data is always the issue. I don't know. It's almost always the issue. Garbage in, garbage out. If you want to get if you want to get good results out of your CRM system, you've got to get good information into it.
So tips for that then, Steve, in terms of, things to be aware of, things to be mindful of with regards to that. So, because I agree with you, it's one of the single biggest reasons why these things fail. So some of the tips you give with regards to this.
So validation rules, first of all, in two ways. First of all, validation rules on individual fields of data. So phone numbers, work out what format you're going to use for phone numbers. So, if you're an international organization, are you going to need to put the national country code for the phone number beforehand? Probably you are. Otherwise, basically, you want a phone number in a phone number field that, if you get a phone interface with your CRM system, you can press a button and it dials a number and it goes through. It doesn't say unrecognized.
That's right.
So you need your numbers +44, open bracket
Yes.
0, close bracket 1952, whatever.
Yes.
So you need something to enforce that format. If you're just dealing with the UK, you don't need the country code. Just do whatever suits your business, but enforce it so that you can't put in a bad phone number that doesn't have a 0 in front of it or something like that.
Yep.
Email addresses, make sure they're genuine. Well, they fit the right format. So they've got the @ sign in there. They've got .com or .uk there. If you don't want to accept generic email addresses like Gmail and Outlook, make sure they're rejected so bad information doesn't get into a record in the first place. You're probably still going to have to do some cleansing every so often anyway.
Yeah, I think you have to.
That stuff doesn't get in.
Yeah, I think, but there's a lot. In some cases, there's a lot of manual data entry. As there's not that automated data entry. So salesperson X, finds an opportunity at the lead stage, and quickly, free types or dictates some information into it. Did you normally see that is where this kind of trips up a little bit, the kind of manual entry into at that stage?
It absolutely does in two ways. You have a situation where the person putting in the information doesn't really care about the information because it doesn't help them. So, for example, industry classification would be a classic one. I'm dealing with someone at lead that's just come in. I can't be bothered to put in an industry. It's not going to help me. It's only going to help those marketing people. So
that's right.
We all hate them. So let's not bother doing that. Unfortunately, just because it doesn't matter for them doesn't mean it doesn't matter to the business.
That's really important.
At some point, you're going to have to put it in there. Secondly, the information might not be available when the person creates the record in the first place. They might be having a great conversation that it would ruin the mood if they said, "Can I have your email address? Because I'm going to spam you to hell afterwards." So they might not want to ask that question because things were going great.
That's right.
Fair enough. The end goal is that we want to sell to these people. So don't ruin that relationship. Don't ruin that conversation, but put in post-processing rules after entry so that missing data can be collected and has to be collected. So the person at that initial call doesn't get interrupted with being asked for information they can't provide, but at the same way, the business does ultimately get that information. So, have a routine that automatically goes through and says, we haven't got a valid email address here. That phone number's in the wrong field. You need to put in an industry classification.
Yeah. I would have liked that as a salesperson. I've used CRM systems where you can't create that rule and condition. So it's like the Wild West. I can choose not to put data in. I can choose to put it in the wrong format should I want, but some CRM systems you can create that rule that says, no, hang on a second, that's missing and you can't progress this until that's complete in the correct way. So that's really important, isn't it, to kind of try to kind of nudge you into making sure that you can't put bad data into the CRM.
So there's things that need to go, and when you have bad or missing data and you've got a validation routine that picks it up afterwards, then it's a question, well, what do? Do you then send it back to the salesperson and say, oi, fill this in now? Or do you have an assistant, a marketing executive, something like that, who fills in the data afterwards? Or maybe do you send it externally? There's no rule as to what you should or shouldn't do there. Just make sure, well, remember, if you don't clean that data, those records are never going to do anything for you. You're going to be screwed, basically.
Absolutely.
So at some
Central
point,
repository of rubbish.
exactly. You may as well just stop calling it a CRM system, just call it a bin. Because that's what you're doing.
Exactly.
How you improve that data, that's up to you. But again, it's almost like you don't want to treat getting good data as some kind of punishment. For people who actually put information into the system. So try and make it easy for them.
Exactly.
At some point, you're going to need a business's address. I hate typing in addresses. It's apart from anything else, you get the weirdest spellings of avenue and drive and all that kind of thing in the entire world. So consider doing a path lookup, postcode address file lookup, so people type in the postcode and it does the address for them.
Exactly. Make it easy. I mean, those
things I don't know, we're old enough. We probably remember when they first came out. It must be about the 1980s, wasn't it? They've been around for years. So put that kind of thing in. It'll work for UK addresses. It may or may not work overseas, depending on the country. And then, every so often, send the data out to get cleansed. Because with the best will in the world, none of this will work perfectly.
No. There's always a margin of error in any data, isn't there? You're never going to get it very clean, perfect all the time. There's going to be a margin of error with regards to it. It's just controlling what that margin is, isn't it?
Yeah, and they can do other things as well. Like they can check an email address that might be the right format, but they can check if it's actually valid as well.
Exactly.
So that's useful. They can, check industry classifications or add them if you haven't got them. And, we talked a while ago in the last podcast about how you should do industry classifications, whether you devise your own system or whether you use something standard like SIC or ISIC or NAIF. That's why you'd probably want to use a standard system, because an external agency can then fill in industry classifications.
Well, I think in Steve now, so we're talking about manual kind of entry there, with the it's person entry, as we're moving along, and I find an opportunity. But obviously, with a lot of CRMs now, and particularly from marketeers as well, there can be a lot of pulling down of data from external sources as a result of that. So, what's important to make sure when that's happening, because to some degree it's a kind of mass machine that could be happening, piling information into that CRM.
And to be honest, information should be piling to the CRM system from other places, because interfaces to other systems are absolutely critical to, if you like, modern business. So you will have that situation. You'll have Steve Baxter in your CRM system, and then Stephen Baxter registers for a webinar. And the webinar tries to record that in the CRM system and says, holy shit, is that a different person? Or is that the same person? So again, no golden rule here. You've just got to make a decision. Where is, if you like, the master record, and what do you do? Now, I would say, and no one is obliged to follow my advice at all, ever. But if you are going to be putting validation routines and data cleansing on the CRM system, then that is probably the most accurate data in your system. Rather than something somebody filled in a form yesterday. So just because that webinar registration is the most recent data, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the most accurate. So I would tend to say, always let the CRM data be the, if you like, the master data, because the CRM data has been verified.
Yes, absolutely.
Your next question, though, is what should you do when there's a conflict? And you've got two choices there. You can have the system, again, this applies to any CRM system, I should think. You can have the system say, we've got a conflict here, what do you want to do? Which is quite nice. It gives you the choice of what to do, but it imposes an administrative burden on you. Someone's got to keep on watching those, saying, okay, we'll accept the CRM record, or we'll accept the webinar registration data. And you don't really want to put any new administrative processes in place. So what I'd always
onerous task to you.
What I always tend to do is say, we're going to decide the CRM record is the accurate one. We will always use the CRM data in case of a conflict, and we will report on what we've done. So the cleansing routine has said, this is what we've done. If you think it's wrong, then you can go back and change it. But generally speaking, CRM, that's the data we're going to validate. That's going to be our master data. That's what we'll accept. Therefore, there's no need for any action to be taken.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've spent many a time, having conversations both with leadership team and sales team in terms of the integrity of the data, because you're going to be taking some business decisions from this. And part of your pre-work we talked about in part one, in terms of your processes, this is all part of this, right? What is the process of collecting data? What are the standards that we need to adopt from day one, and create that standard from day one, and make sure that irrespective of who comes into the business and who leaves the business, that standard is always in place, because that's really important, isn't it, Steve? Because at that beginning, you've got this lovely new Swizzy system, and if you don't start it right from this on, you'll get problems which will perpetuate forever to some degree, isn't it?
Yeah, and as you go through life, you meet people who come up with wonderful sayings. And the MD of a business I used to work for had a fantastic saying. She said, "The standards you get are the standards you accept." And that is beautiful. So if you get this new system that has got 100% perfect data in, if you start letting people get away with putting in bad data, you will always have bad data, and it'll get worse.
Yes, it will.
There's no point having a document that says this is how you enter a phone number, and this is the industry classifications we're expecting you to put in. If you don't enforce that, you may as well put that document in the shredder, because it's absolutely pointless. The standards you get are the standards you accept.
And
so
that applies very much so to us from a CRM point of view. And so we talked about getting the right partner in place, and you've gone through all of these wonderful processes. You're at the stage now, how important is that relationship with that CRM provider? Because, and also, there is a tendency to just kind of go bang and go straight into this. Is there how important is that relationship with your CRM provider? And what would you say in terms of do you go the whole hog and just launch the thing, or is it sometimes good to kind of drip feed a CRM, so this proportion of it first, then bolt on this, then bolt on that, and then do it in a kind of phased kind of way? What's your view on that, Steve?
Okay, well, there's two questions there: relationship with supplier, and how do you do it? Relationship with supplier, it depends on your own resources, and in some ways it depends on the system you use. So if you like, there's one rule not one rule for ZOHO, one rule for everyone else. ZOHO, we have a partner community, we have obviously support operations as well, and we have a development language as well, but it's not like C++, it's not like Visual Basic or something like that. So you won't find lots of people out there who know the ZOHO language. So you'll often find that most organizations who want to deploy a CRM system that's a little bit out of the ordinary, and they want quite a lot of automations building, they'll use a partner. Because they don't have those skills in-house, and they can't put up a job advert that says we want people who've got particular skills in ZOHO deployment. There won't be that many people. On the other hand, if you're dealing with Microsoft or Salesforce or something like that, you will find more people who are there who you can employ internally to develop your systems. In that kind of situation, your relationship with your supplier will be more short-lived, I would say. You might need them early on, but after a while, you'd have your own internal skills for supporting the system. So it depends on the system that you're packaging. Again, we also have other people, we have some ZOHO customers who've developed everything themselves from scratch, without any partner support.
Absolutely.
Because they have, one organization I'm thinking of in particular, who use, I think, about 7 or 8 different ZOHO applications, including CRM, and they've developed everything internally themselves. And they've probably got some of the highest ZOHO skills in the country.
Well, obviously,
depends on how you want to do it.
It does, and that leads quite neatly on into that's because a partner is really. I can imagine for a lot of SME businesses, they don't have that internal function, right? Somebody who has that skill set. So they're probably individuals, business owners. There may be multitask individuals or multi-role individuals who've now got a responsibility for CRM. So choosing a good partner, not necessarily the CRM provider, but a partner that can support them or kind of outsource it to them to some degree is really important, isn't it? So choosing that partner is going to be really important. But then sorry, go on, Steve.
I was going to say, and I know you said I could sort of say something about ZOHO later on, but I'm going to make one sort of comment here anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
And this does come from experience, because a business I used to work at, I'm saying this as if I've worked for about 150 businesses in my lifetime. But anyway, they were HubSpot customer.
Yes.
And I love using HubSpot. I think it's got a great interface. I think they do 1,000,001 things absolutely wonderfully.
That's right.
But they also know how to charge.
Oh, yes.
And one of the things I found absolutely staggering was that when you enter the, if you like, HubSpot economy, you're dealing with partners who basically have this attitude that if you can afford HubSpot, you can afford a massively expensive consultant as well. Whereas certainly with ZOHO, where our traditional base has been in the SME community, you do get obviously we have far more attractive pricing, I'm bound to say that, but also you have far more reasonable partners, and that is tremendously important, because
it is.
SMEs often find themselves in a situation where they recognize that external help would be good, but they're scared shitless they're going to get absolutely ripped off by it.
Yeah.
And the one thing I can say with confidence is we've got a great partner community who are more reasonable and realistic than some of our competitors. So I really would say you can do it yourself with ZOHO and take 9 months over it, or you can get outside support and take 9 weeks.
It's true, because you can achieve both, but I think you have to factor that in as part of your pre-process, right? Like in part one, where how are we going to maintain this? How are we going to train this? How are we going to make sure that we have the skills? Because we don't want to be getting 12, 18 months down the line and we're still not getting the benefit of this thing that we've invested time and effort into. So maybe outsourcing it to a good partner that's going to really help. Again, part of that thing, right? That partner is truly understanding what it is you want to achieve, because you've really done that work as a result of that, not trying to help you with a generic thing, right? So that's super important. So we're coming towards the end of this part. Steve, is there anything else you think is important as a result of this implementation phase, or do we feel like we've covered it?
I guess the other one, it's a little bit boring, so hopefully if people don't switch off as soon as I say that, but
that's fine, we'll get the coffee going.
Tremendously important, training and documentation.
Yes, I agree.
Because most people will customize their CRM system to a degree. So you need documentation and you need training on your system, the way you have customized it. Again, one deployment I remember, we received training on it about 6 months before the system was actually launched. And so we got training on the generic system, which looked nothing like the system we were actually given. So apart from the fact we'd all forgotten it by the time it got rolled out, it just didn't look right. So you need training and you need documentation on the system as it looks for you. And by implication, that means the training can't start until the system is ready to deploy.
That's right.
So there's a limit to what you can do when, and then there's no rule as to how you do training. People seem to love videos nowadays. I like watching videos to a degree, but I always have difficulty. One, it's difficult to skip forward to the bit you actually need.
That's right.
There's no sort of control left to
12-minute video, and it's at the last 2 minutes that is the bit that you want.
And the other thing about videos is, if you change something in your system, you've got to record the whole bloody video again. Whereas if you've just got an old-fashioned document, or we've got the system called ZOHO Learn. Lots of people have got knowledge-based systems like that. If you do it like that, it's really easy to record information, it's really easy to update, and it's pretty easy just to throw in screenshots as well rather than videos. So personally, I'm not a big fan of doing it by video, because I think it becomes a rod for your back. But if you want to do it the video way and you've got people who can do that, by all means use video. So
and I think you have to factor that in, don't you? You have to factor this in from a time point of view, because you're not going to have the ability, unless you've got a really good partner that's offering you a service which is pick up the phone and help me with this kind of traditional approach. But you do have to factor that time element into it, because in my experience, trying to get access to learning, is usually through a knowledge base or a knowledge hub,
Yep.
which you
Yep.
quite rightly said. But you have to factor in that you are going to be spending a little bit of time on that, and prepare yourself and your team for that, and add it in as part of your training and development. Because I think most people don't factor in now that most businesses, most CRM providers don't have an army of 500 people by the telephone waiting to pick up and deal with your specific problem. So you do have to factor in that sort of time to be able to learn and train.
Yeah, you absolutely do. And again, it shouldn't be difficult, but it shouldn't be ignored.
No,
and you have to
that's
take
right.
a lot of responsibility for yourself. I think if you've got a partner, I'm sure the partner would be more than delighted to do it, but don't expect them to do it for free. Because
Exactly.
if it takes them time, it's going to cost you money.
That's right. Yeah,
So
and factor that in.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, Steve. I really enjoyed that, and thanks very much for those tips. Again, at the end, we'll try and put some sort of condense this down into some sort of chronological order and some tips at the end of at this podcast. But I really appreciate your input so far, Steve, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully on part 3, where we're going to be talking about scaling your business and potentially automation and some integration as well. So thanks very much for joining me on this episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one, Steve. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. See you next time.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.